Welcome to the EchoCast. I am Bon, and this is a podcast about video game news, speculation, reviews, and whatever else I feel like talking about. This week we'll be talking about Dragon Age and Mass Effect news, a Plague Tale Requiem review, surprising Xbox Game Pass info, and much more. A few things before we get started. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, and if you're on Spotify or iTunes, please leave a review. On YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on your thoughts, or just say hello, whatever you feel like. It all helps. A huge thank you to supporter level patrons PK the Dawn and Caged Nephilim, and a special thanks to producer level patron Hassan. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, please check out patreon.com/bondiesel or subscribe over at twitch.tv/bondiesel. Amazon Prime subs are very welcome. Okay, let's jump into the gaming news. As a quick preface, I have very slightly adjusted the flow of this podcast. I will talk about it during the content updates part, but you may notice as we go through. First, Dragon Age Dreadwolf enters the alpha stage. So this was a fairly big announcement this week by BioWare and EA, where they confirmed that they have entered the alpha stage of development for Dragon Age Dreadwolf. This isn't that surprising. Over the last few months, over the last year, really, the communication about this project has increased quite a bit, and they seem like they're trying to kind of turn over a new leaf, or whatever you would want to say. I think that EA has been doing a really good job over the over the last few years of really trying to kind of rehabilitate their image, because they were very for a while there, they were basically hostile to single player story games. And it seems like they're getting away from that. Now, obviously, they have these cash cows, like all of their sports games and like all of like Apex Legends and like their live service games like that. And so they're probably relaxing because they have some reliable cash cows. And then maybe they feel like they can kind of re-expand into the narrative space. So we had a game like the Jedi Fallen Order and things like that do extremely well and get reviewed extremely well, but it probably wasn't as profitable as Apex, right? So it is encouraging to see them be excited to dive back into these more single-player things. We have a sequel to Jedi Fallen Order coming called Survivor. We have the new Mass Effect game, which we're going to talk about some stuff with that as well. And we have Dragon Age Dreadwolf, as well as a bunch of other stuff. So this entrance into the alpha stage is a big deal. I highly suggest you go over and check out Mark Dara's video about this. I actually suggested it to him on Twitter and said, hey, I'd love if you'd make a video about this, just to get your take. Because the problem is that, and it's something he talks about, there is a big, there's a big discrepancy in what alpha means to consumers and what it means to BioWare and what it means to EA, right? So the consumer, we think of it as like, oh, like it's like some games let you test game in the alpha stage. Without breaking NDAs, I think I can say that, like, I want to say I tested. There's games I've tested that aren't out yet, so I can't talk about those. Anthem, I'm pretty sure they did a very early test for Anthem, and it was about what you would expect. I also believe Ghost Recon Breakpoint, I believe, was one of them. And again, kind of the same story. But the thing is that those games were probably in the beta stage like in-house, like in the Ubisoft dialect, they would have probably considered it a beta in like its beta stages. But it's, it's like a trendy thing, and to, for all the game developers and publishers to like make players feel like they're letting them in, just the same as the beta thing has basically turned into a demo. Very few betas anymore are in a state that would really be considered like still development, and they very rarely happen, like public beta testing, with nearly enough time to actually make the changes from the data and the information they're going to get. So Mark's video is really good at explaining this, but I'll do my best. So the alpha stage, and it's explained in the big blog that BioWare posted on the Dreadwolf webpage, but it basically says that the alpha certification, or the alpha stage, means that the game, for all intents and purposes, can be played from beginning to end. Not every mechanic is there. The way Mark described it is there's probably a model for everything. It's probably not the final model for everything. There's probably a shader, like all the shaders are in there, but they may not be in their final stage. If you looked at it, it would look bad to the regular consumer. But to a game dev who knows how much of that stuff gets wrapped up at the very end, it's probably not that scary. Those artists work very quickly before a game comes out. And so this is exciting. I won't pretend to be the biggest Dreadwolf fan in the world. It's not really, medieval magic-y games aren't my thing. I'm absolutely going to play this though. And I'm really excited to just follow along. There is the selfish part of me that knows that the sooner Dreadwolf comes out, the sooner they move a bunch of those devs over to full production on Mass Effect. So there's obviously a bias and a selfish intent there, but I'm still excited about it. So if you're a Dragon Age fan, this is exciting. If you're just a fan of RPGs, or you just kind of want to see where BioWare is at, this is a good chance for that. So yeah, so there's that news. Mass Effect. So we had a few things this week. So the main one was yesterday. I'm recording this on Friday. So on Thursday, Mike Gamble quote tweeted with literally just two, I think it was two faces, where it's like the fingers on the chin, like they're thinking, and quote tweeted a video from some space account that showed what it's going to look like in like 5 billion years when the Andromeda galaxy and the Milky Way galaxy run into each other. Now, obviously, it's pretty hard not to glean from that he's trying to suggest something. I will be totally honest and say that it's the sum of all my fears for this next Mass Effect game. And I think I got a similar feel from Cage Nephilim, who in the questions for this week asked, do you think Mike Gamble's tweet was a hint, troll, or just my fan desperation looking for something that's not there? I would say yes. It's probably all three, right? So if you pay attention to especially the Mass Effect subreddit, but even Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that, this quote tweet set everyone to a stir. All of the Andromeda fans are out there being like, see, you idiots, I told you. Like, they seem pretty sure that this means that Andromeda isn't just going to be like mentioned in the next game, but that he's going to be combining galaxies. Now, obviously, this game isn't going to take place 5 billion years from now, but it definitely seems like he's trying to at least somewhat signify, hey, I'm going to be trying to bring these galaxies together. What does that mean? Obviously, we have no idea. I mean, we are only about a week away from N7 Day. Them making that Dragon Age info drop more than a week before N7 Day tells me that they may be trying to clear the room a little bit, maybe for some interesting N7 Day information. We also have the Video Game Awards in about a month. And BioWare back in 2021 or 2020 revealed the original Dragon Age Dreadwolf trailer, as well as the reveal of Mass Effect coming back. So we could be in for like a month and a half of updates on BioWare stuff, whether it's Mass Effect or Dreadwolf. I'm gonna lean towards more Dreadwolf than not, but what does his tweet mean? I don't know. I know I personally want this next game to be like a sequel to 3 that takes place, 1 to 15 years later, that kind of shows where the galaxy is at in its recovery. Maybe reveals some more about the Andromeda mission to us and the initiative, the mysterious benefactor, and so on and so forth. I don't really want. I My issue with them including Andromeda in a big way is that the only ways that my big dumb brain have thought about how they could do that would require them to do things like or like magically have like a relay between the two galaxies suddenly. I also hate it because basically that would mean that they're definitely going to do a big time skip, because say at the end of Andromeda you discover a place that has technology that maybe that can make a relay back to Andromeda or to Milky Way. That means that the absolute earliest the game could be set would be 500 or 600 years later, or actually probably 600 or 700 years later. And that just feels so unsatisfying. And I just don't love it. The other idea is that maybe they'll do like a split story where we'll do some stuff in Andromeda, and then there'll be kind of like a, going back in time, back to the Milky Way. And so they kind of try to tell two stories at once, and maybe even at the end try to find a way for them to converge. I don't know. It just gives me bad vibes. And people have been expressing their feelings very much so in the Mass Effect community. At the end of the day, we don't know what's coming. Maybe we'll get some more insight soon, but we're doing what they want us to do. We're talking about Mass Effect, and all these vague tweets, all these little tiny teases. It's doing a great job of getting Mass Effect on the mind, at least of the more hardcore players. So good for them. There was another tweet after the Dreadwolf announcement of their alpha. Mike Gamble did quote tweet that and said, hey, because they mentioned Mass Effect in that blog. And he says, hey, he confirmed for the first time we've seen it like in writing that the next Mass Effect is a single player game. It seems like he's almost trying to confirm like no co-op, no multiplayer of any kind. And while I know some people would like that, I think I'm a big believer in the keep it simple, stupid theory for this next game. That's why the whole prospect of Andromeda and all that worries me, because I think this next story needs to be a nice, not simple, but just very easy story, right? So or just easy, straightforward game to just get everyone back into the universe. But we'll see. The final thing here was today on Friday, Jennifer Hale posted on her Instagram basically saying, hey, I'm starting a new project. I'm super excited. And then like hashtag NDA and stuff like that. Obviously, her replies then fill full of Mass Effect fans getting hyped. I don't know exactly when like BioWare does their voice acting. I imagine they probably are pretty deep, if not done, with the script of the game and the story. But they're not even in full production yet. I'm under the impression that basically writers are the first to come on and the first to leave. And so the whole idea is that by the time you hit production, writers are typically done, which means that voice acting is happening or has been completed. So maybe Maybe she's working on Mass Effect. Maybe we'll see something teased from Mir. We do typically get a bunch of podcasts from the whole Mass Effect voice acting crew around in 7 days. So I haven't seen any announcements about that, but I bet we hear something next week. And sometimes, especially last year after they had confirmed the game is coming, I believe the voice actress for Liara, like basically said, yes, I am in the next game, and then basically shut up after that because she's probably under some pretty strict NDAs. But they may give us some winks and smiles and stuff about stuff. So we'll have to see about that. Yeah, it's hard to tell what Jennifer Hale's working on. We hope it's Mass Effect, right? But there's also a really good chance she's just working on something because she's in everything. I kind of joke that, if you are playing a video game that has voice acting in it, Jennifer Hale could be the protagonist or could be the rabbit that says hi when you're walking down the road. It's really hard to tell. She does everything. So there we go. All right, so next I want to talk about a Plague Tale Requiem. A little bit of a review here. So the way this is going to happen is I'm going to do like a non-spoiler review. I'm going to talk about what I liked about the game, but without story details. Then I'm going to talk about spoilers. I'm going to talk about some big parts of why I like the game so much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to record this podcast, and at the end, I'm going to look at the timestamp or the time code and basically see how long I talk about spoilers. I'm going to record a little snippet to insert in to tell you, hey, this is future Bond. Just know that once this clip ends, it's spoilers for so many minutes or something like that. And we'll do it like that. So there will be spoilers, but I will give you as much warning as I think I possibly can about it. So, okay, so A Plague Tale Requiem. So it came out, it has a Metacritic score of 85, which is pretty darn good. What bums me out about the Metacritic score is that I'm almost certain it's probably 3 or 4 points lower than it really should be, maybe 5, because it's having issues on especially PC. People are running into a lot of problems with optimization, and on the PS5 and Series X, it only runs at 30 FPS and 1440p. So I think that there are some people dogging it for that. I've seen some people kind of saying that it feels like too much of the same. I I don't really like the first game. I like it. It's a good game. I just couldn't really get into it. So before this game came out, I mostly just watched like story summary videos to know what I was getting into. And in my take on the game, so I started playing it. The first like third of it it's a very good game. It didn't have me like completely enraptured, but I was enjoying it. The actual gameplay is like solid. And it's fun. It can be a little frustrating at times as well. But the story and the characters, the voice acting, the writing, I really, really enjoyed it, especially even at the beginning. And then you hit like the second, third, and the last third of the game, and those two parts of the game, the middle and the end, especially the end, probably some of my favorite moments in gaming ever. It's easily one of my favorite endings of a game ever. So I won't talk about that in this section. I'll wait till the spoilers to talk about it. But yeah, this game really pulled me in, has absolutely enamored me, brought me into the fold. I'm a Plague Tale fan now, and it's so good. I understand. I've seen people talk about like they don't like the movement, they don't like some of the combat and stuff like that. I totally get it. The game probably isn't for everyone. It probably isn't. I think I have let the story definitely overshadow some of the gameplay and the optimization issues. But that, at least from me, should tell you just how good I think the story is and stuff. I've even seen people complain about the story. I've seen people say it's predictable. I've seen people say that there are times where things happen in the story where you kind of like cringe or kind of like roll your eyes, like, the characters are only doing things to move the story along or to create conflict. Absolutely, that is a fact. That's what happens. I'm saying I don't care, because more than anything, the connection between Amicia and Hugo. Amicia is the protagonist that you play as for most of the game, and then Hugo's her little brother, who is kind of the what the whole story is based around, and that he's sick, and they're trying to figure out a way to get him better. And it just was a very excellent game. And without getting into spoilers, I will leave it at that. So, right about now, I will insert a frame, a little clip to say, hey, I'm going to talk about spoilers for this long. Skip ahead if you don't want to hear them. Hey, what's up? This is Bond from the future. I talked about the spoilers of A Plague Tale Requiem for 10 minutes. So if you skip 10 minutes, you should be all in the clear. Okay, bye. Okay, so spoiler time. Last warning, spoilers. So the reason especially the last third and the last hour even of this game just completely pulled me in was, I felt like they did a really, really excellent job of really hammering in this relationship between Amicia, the character you play as, and her little brother. Now, a very, very quick synopsis of what's going on is Hugo, the little brother, has this disease, and the disease is basically it's supposed to be referencing the plague, okay, and so the plague was supposedly spread by rats and things like that. So there's all this lore about that, and the way it's portrayed in the game is it's exaggerated heavily. So just like the first game, you have these like thousands of rats that will come into the world. They're afraid of light though. So if it's daytime, like if there's sunshine, they won't go there. If there's firelight, so if it's a torch or a like a campfire setup, they won't go with that. And that's a big mechanic in the game. You can use it for and against yourself, right? And so another part of the game is that Hugo, the little brother, through his disease, can control the rats in some circumstances. And what you find, and what the story is trying to tell you as it goes on, is that Hugo isn't the first little boy to be infected with this disease. The disease is directly correlated to the rats and the plague, and that there was a boy before him, and that boy is the reason it's happening, and that Hugo may be the next boy. And towards the end of the story, or actually really in the middle of the story, you find out that Hugo's been having these dreams and he wants to go to this island. So you escape this awful stuff that's happening at the beginning of the game. You find someone who will take you to this island, and he thinks this island is where he's going to have a cure. You find as the game goes on that Hugo is connected to the previous infected child through memories, probably through the disease. And you actually find this like fortress way deep in the ground that they tried to build on this island to basically imprison the boy to try to keep his disease from ending the world. Well, they failed. And part of what you find during discovering all this is that that little boy had his own protector, much like Amicia protects Hugo, but she failed. She you end up figuring out that she killed, literally probably dozens, if not hundreds of guards trying to get to this place where they imprisoned the previous infected boy. And you find her core, you find her skeleton, and this is a big moment for them because Amicia now figures out, like they figure out that there is no cure on this island. They thought there would be, there isn't. But she starts to think like, if that previous boy hadn't been taken away from his protector, if he had felt safe and at home, he may not have gone as far as to unleash this plague on everyone with his powers. And so if she can stay with Hugo, she can keep him from making the same mistake. So then, obviously, as the game goes on, Hugo gets kidnapped by this guy who wants to use his powers to dominate the world, as one does, and also convinces Hugo that his sister has been killed during this kidnapping attempt, or at least that's the implication. So on the island, Hugo goes nuclear, falls completely into the disease, and there's this, I really can't describe it, but the imagery of him going all out and being completely consumed by the disease, and essentially, I mean, like literally millions, if not billions, of rats in these waves on this island. Everything's being destroyed. And what happens is Amicia is trying to get to him because she feels like if she can get to Hugo, she can calm him down, and she can be what the previous protector of the previous child couldn't be, and she could save him. And it's just towards the end, you get to this moment where you're pretty sure you're in her head. You're not in the actual world anymore. And he's communicating her little brother to her through whatever means he is. And he's basically giving her these trials to show her like, hey, you have to do things different, because throughout the whole game she's all about vengeance and she kills everyone she can, and the people who are with her kind of say like, hey, like, you don't have to kill everyone, we can sneak around, and you don't have to, you can kill everything, and they like tell you about it. And it gets to this point where she sees Hugo again, and I'm fairly certain this is supposed to be like in her head, but they embrace, and they walk through this kind of dreamscape where it recounts a bunch of the people and the places you met during the story. And then he goes away. And then she comes back to the real world. But he's still talking to her. And she's still trying to find him at the middle of this big monstrosity of this. It's crazy. You just have to play the game to fully understand. But she tells him, or he tells her, Hugo does. He's like, you know what you have to do to stop this? I'm not even here hardly anymore. Like I'm gone. And to stop this, the world ending, you have to kill me. And like, it's just rough. But I don't think that my description of what I just said, it doesn't mean anything unless you play through the whole game. So even if you've listened to this and been spoiled, I still think if you play the game, you see their relationship, how close they are. You see during the whole game, the Hugo, the little boy, even though he's very sick and he's having all these issues and all this terrible stuff is happening around him all the time, he still stops and points out how beautiful that flower is, or how nice this person was, or how pretty something is, or how excited he is for something. And, you know, having a kid who's only a couple years younger, like they did such a good job of really expressing Hugo's the fact that, like, and you see this with kids. I think this whole story is an allegory or whatever for like childhood, like terminal cancer, and how when you if you've ever known people in that situation, or you know, but you always see these stories about these kids who are like terribly sick, but they're still just kids. They just want to be kids. They don't want to be the kid hooked up to machines. They don't want to be the kid who's dying. They just want to be a kid, and they really portrayed that well, I think, in this game. That which only made the ending more heartbreaking and harder to take, because there's parts of the game where you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna find a cure and Hugo's gonna live, and then especially that there's a line that if I play the game again, which I will one day, it's gonna hit me so hard. But there's a line where Amicia and Hugo are just walking, and he goes, you know, it's okay if I die. And it's just like, oh, and that's obviously in hindsight some pretty blatant foreshadowing. And she goes, no, we'll find a way to save you. We'll find a way to help you. And that's even the thing that happens at the very end when Hugo tells Amicia when he's gone, he's become part of this monster. In her head, he tells her, like, you can kill me. He says it. He's like, you know, I love you, and you made me happy. I was happy when I was with you, but it's too late. Like, this has gone too far. It can't be reversed now. And it's just like, man, like, even if you've listened to these spoilers, I still really suggest you at least go try it. And I suggest at least trying to get to the island. If you haven't played, you don't know what that means, but get to the island, and then if it doesn't catch you after you do some stuff there, then fine. But I mean, this game, the ending is right up there to me with the Red Dead games, which I love those endings. They're so heartbreaking in their own way. Right up there with, the Mass Effect games, for sure, definitely in there. Just so good and just so heartbreaking. And there is an epilogue that's really good. You should play it. It's actually what made me like break down when I was playing the game. I was devastated by the end of the game, and I was definitely very emotional. But the epilogue like had me bawling, and it was because they did a good job of reinforcing what had happened, but also kind of setting a path forward. And they also, there's actually an after the credits scene that definitely suggests they're making a third game and that it may be set in modern times, which is really interesting. So there's that. So there's my ranting and review of A Plague Tale Requiem. Yeah. Okay. So Xbox Game Pass, it is making money. So this week, Phil Spencer spoke at a conference or something and talked a whole bunch about Game Pass, more so than we had ever heard before. He talked about how the revenue makes up about 15% of Xbox's revenue, which isn't as much as people would have thought. It was like a little surprising, but I mean that's it's a company, it's a part of, it's a division that makes billions and billions of dollars, so it's still a ton of money. But easily the biggest news from it was that there's been debates for months, years at this point, whether or not Xbox Game Pass could ever be profitable. You have to keep in mind that when games come to Xbox Game Pass, depending on whether they're exclusive, whether they're day one, all of these little things, Xbox pays for that. And sometimes they invest heavily into these games being made and basically will give especially indie devs, enough money to cover the development of the game. And then they go from there. So it's especially for indie games, like I'm sure A Plague Tale Requiem, games like I'm trying to think what some of the other ones were. Of course, I won't be able to while I'm sitting here thinking, but anything that you've seen, basically, depending on how it gets to Game Pass, they have to spend a lot of money on it. And even just for games ongoing, even if they don't come day one and stuff or exclusive, they still have to pay for the licensing of those games for people to download them as part of the subscription. So with all of that, finding out that it's already making money is a really big deal. And also finding out that, especially because Game Pass is extremely good. I love having it. It's worth every penny to me. But they haven't even put out like a bunch of really good exclusive games yet. They've had Forza, they've had Halo, and some other games. And those games have been good. But they've also delayed, 5 times as many games. So even in 2023, we're looking at Starfield, Redfall, maybe Hellblade, Senua's Saga, a bunch of games that, if they're very good, or even if they're just decent, it's going to make the value of Game Pass way more than it is now, and will very likely push people even more likely to want Game Pass. Because during the talk, Phil Spencer even said, hey, we don't really know if Game Pass will ever be more of our profits than this, of our revenue. It's 15% may just be where it's at, because he said, basically we're at a point where we feel like basically everyone who has an Xbox and wants Game Pass is getting it. Now on the PC side, they had 80% growth or something, or it was 150. They had a lot of growth on the PC side of things, and because the PC Game Pass is great too. So it's really interesting. It's been interesting seeing people try to spin this as a negative thing and stuff like that. This seems really good, and I think it's only going to be better for Xbox as they release more games that are more desirable, that will only be on Xbox, especially if the Blizzard Activision deal goes through. So We'll have to wait and see. Ubisoft put out their financial report. There was a bunch of stuff in it, obviously, as there always is and will be. The big takeaway was, if you're a Rainbow Six or the Division fan, is to know that there was a big section in there talking about the future of how they want to kind of treat their big franchises. I read through it myself, but I also did watch a video by Rogue Gold, who's a big The Division creator. So I highly suggest you go check out his channel and check his video for way more detail that I'm going to give. But essentially, what the report states is that the way that they just, I think about a month ago, did a big Assassin's Creed showcase where they showed the future of Assassin's Creed probably for the next like 5 or 6 years. They want to try to invest in their 3 biggest franchises like that. So Assassin's Creed, and then they specifically name Rainbow Six and The Division. So if you've heard me rant about The Division and things like that, I've felt like Ubisoft doesn't give it the respect it deserves, because I think it absolutely is one of their biggest franchises, or it should be. And this financial report seems to back that up. So what that means, so Rainbow Six, when they mention that, what you need to keep in mind is the way that they showed off that Assassin's Creed thing was a whole bunch of games, not just the next one, right? And so my guess is that for like Rainbow Six, obviously I'm sure Siege is going to keep going. I don't foresee a Siege 2 or anything like that, but I also wouldn't be surprised at all if we get some more Rainbow Six experiences. Now, Extraction, the mode they put out, earlier this year, I think was pretty bad. I don't think it was very good. And I have to imagine it's not very popular. They're still putting out content for it because one thing Ubisoft does well is they support their games, even if there's like 15 people playing them. Here's looking at you, Roller Champions. The Division being mentioned in this is exciting because we know, and they've kind of alluded to this, like the Division universe thing going on. We know that there's more Division 2 content coming, that there's a year 5 coming, even though I think it's kind of hard to be super excited because year 4 it's got some good story stuff, but it's kind of lackluster and it's been kind of rough. But we know there's a year 5. We know that Heartland is coming eventually. We know Resurgence, the mobile game, is coming probably fairly soon. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if the movie that everyone keeps talking about, I would be surprised if that happens, but it probably will. But I think that Division 3 is 100% in the works. Literally, probably not even the concept stages. I can't imagine they have many devs available to do it right now. It could be in pre-production, but I kind of doubt it. I bet it's at least an idea and a thing they're going to do. I just don't see any big moves happening on it until the Star Wars game is done, which will be a couple years from now, probably. Because, again, if you don't know, the Star Wars team, the Ubisoft massive Star Wars game, is being worked on by like a majority of the Division team. There's obviously still people working on the Division. Some of them were from the old Division team, but a lot of them weren't. And they are hiring to try to fill their own team just to work on Division 2. So I would be surprised if, I think Division 3 happens. I think that's part of the strategy that they talked about in this financial report, but I wouldn't count on it soon. It's probably 5 or 6 years away, is what I would honestly guess. We'll see. Maybe not. I could be wrong. Okay, The Last of Us 2 voice actor is willing to come back. So the voice actor for Abby, who is one of the new characters to the series, has said that despite all the drama, she's willing to come back. I'm not a big Sony fan. I love The Last of Us 2, though, from just watching gameplay and learning about the story and the lore and watching all the summary videos and stuff like that. That controversy was so weird. It was so funny to me that people, a bunch of weird gamers got real weird about that game. But what's so funny to me is they didn't get that mad about the protagonist ended up being gay. They didn't get that mad about a bunch of other stuff. They focused all of their ire on a straight white lady who has some muscles, and there's reason for it. It's not like it's just random. I will never understand the reaction to that game. It seems like a really, really good game to me. It honestly seems like more than I really want to deal with. It's very rough. It's very graphic. But I think this is cool. I'm glad that the experience that that voice actor had wasn't so negative. They didn't want to come back. I think with all of the negativity around games and maybe just in general in the world, what I think people, I hope, are starting to realize is that very often that toxicity and stuff comes from like 1% of people. And it may be loud and it may be prolific and it may be ongoing and it may be really bad. But I think that people are starting to realize that they can kind of ignore it or kind of push back on it and be like, hey, okay, whatever, like shut up. And I hope that's the case here. I absolutely think we see a Last of Us Part 3. Knowing how 2 ended, I think it could be really cool. And by then, maybe I'll own a PlayStation and I can play it. But I think this is good news. I'm happy to see it. We found out this week that Fallout 4 is getting a next gen upgrade. This is kind of surprising to me. It's quite late for that. But okay. I know a lot of people don't like Fallout 4. This upgrade is going to include things like new textures, better optimization, things like that. I think Fallout 4 is really good. It definitely lacks in some places where New Vegas and even Fallout 3 kind of excelled more than it did, but it also pushed some things forward. And I think it was a half step to the next gen graphically and stuff like that, but it was better in a lot of ways. And it tells a cool story with a lot of options and ways to do things. Again, it's not perfect. It's not my favorite Fallout game, but it's definitely a game I like, and I'm glad it was made. And I think it's cool they're doing a next gen upgrade. We'll see if I play it. I actually did play it on my Xbox, I think last year, and played through a lot of the story again. And this is cool. I'm sure I'll check it out. The Callisto Protocol is being banned from sale in Japan. So apparently Japan has some pretty strict rules. Some of the Southeast like Asian countries have some interesting rules with like morality stuff. So I believe it's in like China. You can't have like skeletons in your game for like religious reasons and kind of cultural reasons. I believe there's some rules like that in Japan as well. And what the developers of Callisto Protocol basically said is, like with bigger game devs, Japan pushes back, says, "Hey, take this stuff out." And EA and Ubisoft, these big publishers and developers can just be like, "Okay, whatever, we'll do it," or they take that into account at first. The Callisto Protocol is being made by an indie dev, even though it's a really good one, and they just basically are saying like, okay, like we aren't gonna fix it, so it's just not gonna happen. Now I did read a little bit and found that it's a little more complicated than that. That I believe there's no region lock for the Japanese area, so they'll be able to buy copies from surrounding areas and be able to play it. And so it's not like it's going to be impossible to play in Japan. It's just going to be more difficult than it probably should be. But I thought that was kind of an interesting little story. Another interesting story is Age of Empires 2 and 4 are coming to Xbox next year in 2023. So apparently they've been doing a bunch of testing and a bunch of work to figure out how to be able to play Age of Empires 2 and 4, which they're real-time strategy games on the Xbox. This isn't completely unheard of. Games like Halo Wars are known for being real-time strategy games that play extremely well on consoles. The reason it's difficult, if you don't know what a real-time strategy game is, it's a type of game that you have like a god view, and it involves a lot of really detailed selecting and movement of groups of soldiers and characters that is hard to do with a mouse, let alone a controller. So I'm really curious to see how they handle it and how people receive it, and how popular it even is, really. But I bet it'll be more popular than people think. Okay, so we'll get into a couple games that came out this week. The first one was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Now, last week I talked about the campaign. I finished it up. It was the Call of Duty campaign, but I had a lot of fun with it. It had tons of highs, not very many lows. There were a few parts of it I didn't love, but I'll leave that out for spoiler reasons. But I do want to talk about the multiplayer. So today I've played probably a little too much of the multiplayer when I maybe should have been doing other stuff. But I'm really enjoying it. It has the drop shotters, it has the bunny hoppers around the corner, stuff that's annoying. They did get rid of things like slide canceling and stuff like that. So it seems like they are trying to make it a little more fun for the people like me who want like a less arcadey experience, but that stuff is still there. But you can still have fun even if you don't want to mess with that stuff. I've really enjoyed it. The single player campaign got the initial Metacritic reviews. It's like a 65 or something like that. Or 75 maybe. I don't think that's deserved. I think the story is at least like a 7 or a 7.5. So like 70 or 75. I have to imagine that the completed reviews that take into account the multiplayer as well, it really needs to be above 80. The Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is a very good game. I really hated how many outlets kind of took their shot at, to kind of, I just like IGN gave the campaign a 6 out of 10. I read the review. I understand why the person reviewed it at that, but that really kind of gets to a point where it's like, it kind of feels like you guys had someone review this who didn't want to like it, and then they didn't like it. And so I don't think that you have to give like the review to a fanboy who's going to give it a 10 out of 10. But I think that you should maybe give the review to someone who doesn't seem like they like wanted to not like it before they even got in. That's the interpretation I took, but it is what it is. But Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, I really have enjoyed it. I will probably play it quite a bit. The multiplayer, I'll rank up a good amount. And then when that the DMZ mode comes out and Warzone, when those come out, I'll probably shift over to those. But I'll try to stick with the multiplayer longer with this game than I did the last one. Bayonetta 3, after all of its controversy, came out, and it has a Metacritic score of 88. So it's putting itself right up there with some of the best games of the year. All the reviews I've seen is that it's a wonderfully creative, wonderfully voiced and written, and just a super fun game to play. But that the Switch is holding it back big time, and that's a major bummer. I bet if this was on PS5 or Series X and was able to take advantage of that hardware, I bet this game would be in the mid 90s. From the reviews I've read and watched, I bet this game would be at least above 90 in the Metacritic score if it wasn't being held back by the Switch. I mean, the Switch was outdated when it came out. The Switch is basically like a really outdated tablet at this point. And the developers do a good job of pulling everything they can out of it, but I see people all the time being like, why haven't they released like a Switch Pro that's more powerful? I will tell you exactly why. You should go look at the NPD numbers. You should see how many Switches are being sold every month still. They are selling them like crazy. And until people stop buying them, they aren't gonna, I bet they've probably had at least the idea to do a Switch Pro for years. But why would they do that? Why would they put out new hardware when the old hardware still sells better than like the Xbox Series X and the PS5? If your old hardware is still competing with them, why would you, from a financial standpoint? So but yeah, Bayonetta 3 seems like it's really, really great despite all the controversy, and that Helena Taylor has dug herself quite a hole. I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt for a long time, and even I'm off board at this point. I'm glad the game got through all that silliness and came out to critical love. The last game here that came out was Gotham Knights. It has a 69 Metacritic score. It basically just seems like it was just a big flop. A lot of people are talking about how it's a game that came out in 2022 that is worse than the last Gotham, the last Batman game that came out like 8 years ago on like the last gen, like the last gen. And it just seems like it was a game that it kind of reminds me of Battlefield 2042, where it seems like they intended for it to be a live service game, and then something happened. I think probably Marvel Avengers happened, and they pulled the plug on that. But the game was designed from the ground up to be live service, so you can't really pull all those elements out. So you do the best you can, and what you're left with is a graphically unimpressive game with an okay story. that is a shell of itself, and on top of that had major performance issues. On the Series X and PS5, it only runs at 30 FPS, and it doesn't do it consistently. And it was supposed to be a cross-gen game. Like, this game was designed to work on the Xbox One and PS4, and then they cut those out, and then they can't even get it to run well in the new systems. That's not a new system problem. That's a problem with Gotham Knights. And I'm willing to bet that in the next few months, they'll probably put out a performance mode that does improve at least the frames, maybe at a lower resolution. But it's just a swing and a miss, unfortunately. And that happens sometimes. Okay, so let's get into the listener questions part of the show. If you have any gaming related questions, topics, or news, please jump into our Discord to post them for the next episode of the podcast. You can also tweet it to me or tag me in tweets on Twitter if you want me to cover some specific news. My Twitter handle is @BonDiesel. The first set of questions comes from Source Rage 17. If they were to do another sizable DLC to the Division 2, like Warlords of New York, what, where, and who direction would you like to see it go? City, faction, etc. I almost don't want to speculate on it because I think this is just definitely not going to happen. If they were to do it and they were going to do another Warlords type thing, I think, considering the way the story is in the Division 2 at this point, I think like a Boston or a Philadelphia would be interesting. I wouldn't want to go too far west necessarily, because I want Division 3 to take place in Chicago. But if you catch all the lore about the Black Tusk and stuff, you'll know that they've been taking over like basically big cities to try to take control of their fuel stores, because obviously gasoline and diesel is not being made at this point in the outbreak, more than likely. And so in order for the Black Tusk, who's this very technologically advanced faction that needs fuel for their vehicles and generators and stuff like that, I think if they tried to spread the story out to Philly or Boston, I think those would be pretty cool. I think those would make sense as a place for locations of like real high up Black Tusk operatives or something like that. I think that'd be pretty dope. So when it comes to, let's see, faction stuff like that, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that because I'd be here all day trying to think of stuff. In Boston, they can have like the Minutemen or something. If you read the comics and the books, they actually have created lore for other cities of what the factions in those cities call themselves and their kind of unique spin on why they came to power and stuff like that. Some of that stuff is really cool. The second question from Source Rage is, when just chilling and wanting to play some games, everyone has a relaxing, chill game. Mine, for example, would be Cities Skylines. What game or games would you be your go-to relaxing brain shut-off game? So for me, it would probably be like Age of Empires. It would probably be like Apex Legends, just something I can just get in and just play and not think too much about it. Mass Effect to a point at this point. I know that game so much forward and back that I'm not like on the edge of my seat anymore when I play it. So it's just like it's like a home cooking game for me. But those would probably be the big ones I find myself going to. The Division can have those moments where I just load it up and knock out some control points. But yeah, so I get it. I understand what you're saying, and thank you for the questions. Master Prime had a few questions. The first one is, do you think the Series S is a dead weight for the new generation? Probably in some ways. My main issue is something that I saw pointed out a lot with the Gotham Knights thing. A Rocksteady dev said and then deleted a tweet that the Series S is holding everything back and blah, blah, blah. My pushback on that is that all of these games coming out right now are speccing the low end of their PC specs way below the Series S. And so I won't really believe that that's the problem until you start to see the minimum specs for PC start to climb above the Series S power. People don't realize that if you're making a game that's going to go on PC, I talked about, I think last week, that the top like 4 or 5 cards on Steam when they do their hardware survey are like really old, super underpowered cards, and it makes up like 25 to 30% of PC gamers that have these like 1660s and stuff like that. So I don't really see. I don't think the Series S is as big of a dud or a dead weight as some people think it is. Let's see. Your second question: which game has the best gunplay? It's Tarkov. Tarkov just has such good gunplay. Obviously, Call of Duty and stuff like that is great. I think Battlefield 2042 actually has really good gunplay, but Escape from Tarkov, especially for a PC game, it's just the best. I have problems with that game. I don't love everything about it, but it's got extremely good gunplay for sure. Then have I played Sunset Overdrive? I have not played the legendary Sunset Overdrive, though I will forever be sad that Sony acquired that studio instead of Xbox, because they are making some of the best games ever now, and man, Xbox really could have used that, I think. Okay, so for the polls, I had one. I ran one talking about the 60 FPS with the Gotham Knights and kind of that whole thing. And I said, what is the minimum resolution you'll play games at to get at least 60 FPS? The selections were 4K, 2160p, 2K, 1440p, 1080p, or dynamic resolution. And the results were in first was 1080p at 44%. Second was 2K or 1440p, which is 37.3%. And then 4K at 10% and dynamic resolution at 8. That's surprising but heartening to me, because as this generation goes on, we're going to see even like what we saw with the Plague Tale Requiem, is that because it's only 30 FPS, we're going to see that there's going to have to be a choice made. And I think that you see that 80% of gamers are willing to play at 1440 or even 1080p if they can have 60 FPS. I think that's okay. I think that I feel like 4K turned into such a buzzword, and it is cool. It looks great. But if it hurts the gaming experience, I think you're going to see people be more than happy to play at lower resolutions if they can get those frames. Now, you are going to have tech like FSR and, things like what NVIDIA has, be able to use some other methods to keep high resolution and get good frames. And that's probably the future in a lot of ways. But this generation of consoles, we're probably going to see a dip in resolution, because once you hit 60 FPS, once you play it, it's hard to go back. It just is. So, okay. So for some content updates, the Mass Effect giveaway is still going. Check out at Bond Diesel and at the EchoCast on Twitter. I'm giving away like $300 worth of Mass Effect merch. Please get in there and enter. That giveaway will end in 7 day at noon Eastern time. Benny Fitz, if you look up at Benny Fitz or look him up on Twitch, he's a streamer. He has a really cool deal. He uses like a puppet and he plays games at the same time. Really, really good dude. His house burnt down. So if you can please seek him out, and maybe if you can donate some money to his GoFundMe, that would be super, super cool. And I would very much appreciate it. And then finally, the changes to the podcast. If you didn't notice, I am, even though I talked about both of the games this week, I'm not going to do the Mass Effect and the Division 2 section of the podcast anymore. I'm forcing myself to talk about the Division, and I just don't care. Unless there's news, I don't want to make stuff up to talk about. And it's similar with Mass Effect. I think Mass Effect will have stuff to talk about plenty over the next few years, just maybe not every week, and I don't want to force it. So that is also going to go away, as well as the ad I was doing in the middle for Patreon. People will support if they want to. That ad's not going to make a difference. My attempt with the Division 2 and Mass Effect things was to try to not just be a general gaming news podcast, and to still try to cater directly to those communities. But it didn't seem to work. It didn't do what I wanted, and I didn't like doing it. So that's where we're going for now. And we're also going to start wrapping this thing up. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. This is a fun hobby for me, but I do take it very seriously, and I really do appreciate people giving me their time, even if it's while they drive to work, or while they're at work, or while they are trying to fall asleep and they want to hear me bore them to death. I do appreciate you listening. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're on Spotify or iTunes, please rate the podcast. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment down below, even if it's just to help the algorithm. You can find me all over the internet as Bon Diesel, including on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and over on Twitch. If you're interested in supporting the show or my other content, as well as getting some perks, please check out patreon.com/Bon Diesel, or use your Twitch Prime sub over at twitch.tv/Bon Diesel. I would very much appreciate it. That is all I have. So until next time.